All right. Wow. Thank you all for letting us know where you are joining us from. I'll just read a few. There are a lot of people on this call. We're just over 100 people
Wow.
already. So Miami Beach, San Francisco, Indianapolis, Tampa, Providence, sunny, beautiful South Beach, Hollywood, Florida, Wexford, snowy Wexford, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Northern California, visiting Miami in May. Please let us know when you're here and say hello at the Welcome Center. Indiana, aloha from Hawaii, Manhattan, Puerto Rico, Iowa, Scotland, Chicago, and I would read it all, but we might not have enough time. The last one I see is Brussels. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Daniel Serraldo with the Miami Design Preservation League, and this is our second program of the day, of the Saturday in our lecture series. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, the City of Miami Beach and the original Miami Beach Antique Show and Miami-Dade County. I realize though I am saying things that our moderator should be doing. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Jack Finglas. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel. Hi, everyone. My name is Jack Finglas. I'm a board member of the Miami Design Preservation League and chairman of the Miami Beach Historic Preservation Board. We are thrilled to welcome you to our 44th annual Art Deco Weekend 2021 program entitled, quote, "The Real Houses of Miami Beach," end quote. We thank our members for their support. If you are not yet a member of the League, please visit mdpl.org to join our mission to preserve, protect, and promote design and preservation in the South Florida area. The festival is sponsored with the generous support of the City of Miami Beach, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, the state of Florida, and the original Miami Beach Antique Show, which will take place on March 12th to the 16th at the Miami Beach Convention Center. Today's speaker is Arthur Marcus. Arthur is an architect, photographer, and historic preservation consultant living in South Florida with his own architectural studio since 1992. A native of Philadelphia, he graduated with a BA in political science from Temple University and a Master of Architecture from Carnegie Mellon University, just like me. Arthur has had a long history of civic activism in South Beach, serving many years on the MDPL board, as well as being chair of the then combined CMB Historic Preservation and Design Review Boards. He currently serves as vice chair of the City of Fort Lauderdale Historic Preservation Board. Architecture and photography have been lifelong passions from an early age. One has certainly informed the other over the course and geography of his career. Quote, "At Central High in Philadelphia, I had an inspiring English professor who would have had the class initially write a one-page story. Then we would summarize that page into one paragraph. Then the assignment would be to summarize the paragraph into one sentence. Finally, that sentence was to be condensed into a single word. That is what I strive toward in my photography," end quote. If you have a question for Arthur after his chat, please enter it into chat and it will be answered at the end of the lecture. And now, without further ado, it is my real pleasure to introduce my friend Arthur Marcus.
Thank you, Jack. It's good to be here, and I wish everyone good afternoon. And I wanted to thank Daniel Serraldo and the Miami Design Preservation League for sponsoring this virtual talk for Art Deco Weekend. I'm going to just give me a moment while I handle technical things, and I'm hoping that everyone can now see the pictures, the slides. I'm old-fashioned. So way back in the before times, as I was saying, around the year 2014, which certainly sounds like a century ago, Daniel and I navigated around Miami Beach by boat. Actually, Daniel drove the boat and I took pictures, but we both did this together. And with the express purpose of capturing some of these wonderful homes, at least by waterfront, because way back when a lot of people traveled by water from house to house rather than road because it was just much easier. These are organized chronologically by date. These grand and sometimes not so grand residences embody the striving spirits of Miami Beach while interpreting the architecture of their time in every generation and in every decade. The black and white photographs following are courtesy of History Miami, unless otherwise noted. I am the photographer of all the color photos. We hope that this talk raises your awareness of the architectural provenance of these notable structures and how neighborhoods in Miami Beach have been changing ever since they were built. Hopefully through a study of our past examples of architecture, we may inform what is to come in the future. We begin in 1914 with Thomas Pankos' home on the northern edge of Lake Pankos. He notably served as the city's second mayor and was a prominent citizen and was the beginning of generations of a local family with distinguished lineage. This graceful two-story home was designed by the architect John W. King and was the first house in the area to be built of poured concrete. I guess they were learning from the hurricanes very early. The house was unfortunately demolished in 1953. And still in 1914, although this photo was taken in 1922, if you look on the extreme left of the photo is the home, The Shadows, which was the home that Jane and Carl Fisher built right on the beach at the end of Lincoln Road. And Carl Fisher built this with the express purpose of luring all his other friends and wealthy clients to come and also build homes, and build they indeed did. It's a very interesting photograph because you look on the center right, all the way on the extreme right, you can see the enclosed tennis courts that Fisher had built. And just to the left of that, which is right at the corner of Lincoln and James, are the outdoor tennis courts. If you look further up Lincoln Road, which is already pretty developed for the year 1922, you can see the form of the Miami Beach Community Church, which was built in 1921. It's a fascinating photo, and I love the fact that two things: parking is already an issue at the beach, and everybody was beginning to socially distance, even though they didn't know what they were doing at the time. These are great photos that really show a moment in time. At the left, in 1916, was the Snowden Residence. Snowden purchased 1,600 lineal feet of oceanfront for his winter estate. This was practically a country estate because it was basically situated just beyond the northern limits of the city. He was a partner with Carl Fisher in his Miami Ocean View Company and purchased the land for his palatial estate from John Collins. It seems like in a small town, everyone knows everyone else. I had to juxtapose the photo on the right, even though it's out of chronological order, because it shows the Snowden, AKA later to be named the Firestone Residence, on the left, which served as the construction offices for the building of the Fontainebleau on the right. So it's sort of like the passing of the baton, so to speak. Now we are in 1922, 31 Star Island Drive. And this was the Biscayne Bay elevation. Unfortunately, this is demolished. A number of architects worked on this home, but it's a very classical facade facing Biscayne Bay. And although you can see on the right hand of the historic home, there were additions made in the photograph on the right, it's still it was, before it was demolished, pretty intact. It was interesting to see that there was no grand entrance to the home, but rather on the left side with a small awning of Spanish tile. That was the main entrance when you dropped off your car and you entered the home. 1922, first of all, these are wonderful pictures. I want to thank Carolyn Klepser with her great book, Lost Miami Beach, which is a trove of wonderful information about where Miami Beach has come from. I love the photo on the upper left because it sort of gives the idea of a typical neighborhood in 1922 in Miami Beach. And the house below, excuse me, on the bottom, which you can actually see in the photograph above on the extreme left with the tall arches, was one of the first Art Deco / modern designs in Miami Beach, way ahead of its time, obviously. I do not have the architect, but it's a wonderful insight into how different styles were being developed at the same time. 1923 on the upper right, you have the home of James Cox. James Cox came to Miami Beach after 1920 when he had run for president and lost. But one of the notable things about his run was that his vice presidential candidate was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. After losing to Warren Harding, he moved to Miami Beach to visit his friend Carl Fisher, and lo and behold, he never left. He purchased the Miami Daily Metropolis newspaper and transformed it into the Miami News and ran that for many years. This home was formerly located around 44th and North Bay Road, just north of the Nautilus Hotel, which is now Mount Sinai Hospital. And this was a Mediterranean-style home designed by Phineas Paste. And I'm sorry, that's the wrong note. As we move along, we see that not every home on the waterways was a grand home. This was in 1924 by the architect Robert Taylor. And it's interesting that Taylor was the principal architect for Newton v. Roni, who obviously later on built the Rooney Plaza. He designed practically all of the properties for Fisher, except and including, he also designed the buildings on Espanola Way. This home at 27 Star Island, a little later, or up to 1925, has been moved to another location on the same property, but this was originally located on the water. It's no longer anymore. We think that the portico, Daniel thought that the portico may have been added later. One of the interesting things I find about this house is if you look on the second floor on the upper left, it's interesting why the doors were never centered on the roof line. And of course, the roof is not exactly symmetrical either. So there's a lot going on here. And typically in these homes, it's hard to tell, but a lot of the surface decoration may also have been added later. Now in 1925, one of the grand houses on Miami Beach, this is 40 Star Island Drive, designed by the architect August Geiger for James Allison. And Allison was a well-known figure in Miami Beach. I'm sure we've all heard his name. He was Carl Fisher's partner in the Presto Light Company in Indianapolis, as well as many other businesses throughout their lives. He also built the Miami Beach Aquarium in 1921, and Fisher named one of the islands filled in at the mouth of Indian Creek as Allison Island. I found a very interesting commentary about the two of them. One of the people who worked with both of them had said that their styles complemented each other famously. A mutual business colleague said of Allison that Fisher was the fountain of ideas, but impetuous, while Allison was the steady hand and an outstanding manager. Fisher was the dreamer, but Allison had the most brilliant mind of any man I ever knew. He was the industrialist. This home by 42 Star Island, which is unfortunately demolished, and I'm sure a lot of us in Miami Beach were familiar with the struggles that went along with this, was originally designed by the architect Walter DeGarmo and demolished in 2014. Carl Fisher decided in 1924-25 that it was time to build a new house. I guess it was getting a little too crowded on the beach. And he built a home at 5020 North Bay Road, again, just north of Mount Sinai, AKA the Nautilus Hotel. And it's interesting because on some of these old pictures, you see portions of the grounds and a sense of the way the house looked. And of course, there's the tower. Everything Fisher built, he always had a tower so he could take prospective clients up to the top floor and show them properties, similarly to the way he had designed the Van Dyke building and had the open air loggia at the top where you could take clients to view. The other interesting thing is the photograph on the upper left shows the long vanished formal gardens that Fisher designed as part of the home. And they look like formal gardens which lead to a raised swimming pool at the end. This home is still there, and it's actually looking better than ever, especially when you approach it from the water. And it's now owned, I've forgotten the name, Daniel, by a local developer who actually,
Ugo Colombo.
Ugo Colombo. And Daniel had told me, and I had not been aware of, there's a very sensitive addition on the left, to the left of the tower. And this was not original, because if you look at the original picture down below, you can see the tower and then it sort of melds into nothingness, so to speak. It's, in one way, it's wonderful that it melds together so that you don't know that it's new. But on the other hand, the problem is you don't know it's new. It's hard to tell the old from the new. It's still a wonderful composition, and it really forms the backbone of a great estate. In 1925, just to give you a hint of what was happening in Miami Beach, it was amazing to see how much of the city was developed and developing at this early stage. Fisher was spent the war years forming roads and forming islands. And what I love about this photo is you can see in the distance, the land masses, the islands in Biscayne Bay that were in the midst of being transformed by Fisher into the Sunset Islands. And you can see the same thing further on, where in the Venetian Islands, you can see they've just dredged out a few of the islands, and some of them are filled in, some have homes already. So it's a fascinating thing to see. I love looking at these old photos of Miami Beach and seeing how things evolve. You also can see, if you look towards the lower center, an L-shaped building under construction. This was the Rooney Plaza being completed. And due west of that are two towers. These were the original Marconi wireless towers that basically connected Miami Beach to the rest of the world. But 1925 is well known in Miami Beach for the opening of the Rooney Plaza Hotel. This basically became not only the architectural, but the social center of Miami Beach. I had found this great photo on the right of the entrance to the Rooney Plaza. And as an architect, I always find details like this very interesting, because before you even go in the doorway, you know from the size and the ornateness of this door that you're entering somewhere special. The picture on the right was Newton Roni, who was the developer and the namesake for the hotel. But back to some of the other residences that were happening here. A lot of these are not known, like this one is up in Lagoor Circle, built in 1928. I do not have an architect for it, but there's a stateliness about it that grabbed my eyes immediately as we drove around. Then back, and also in 1931 now, we're up to 22 Star Island. Keenel and Elliott with another prolific architectural firm in Miami Beach. This house has been saved. It was in the process, as you can see, back in 2014, and it has since been moved to another location on the same site. I'm losing my place here. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. Now, 2954 North Bay Road, Carlos Schopel, again, was yet another well-known architect during the 20s and 30s in Miami Beach, and he specialized in Mediterranean homes, grand Mediterranean homes of all different sizes. So this one, basically, he was born in Austria. He came to Miami Beach in 1933, and he designed many homes along Florida's Gold Coast. There are also several homes that are on Pine Tree Drive, which are not included in this presentation because it's hard to see them both from the water and from the street. So it's hard to get a sense of what those homes look like. But North Bay Road is much more accessible, which is good. 4750 North Bay Road. Lester Avery was yet another architect. He was better known for his mid-century modern designs, or MiMo, but he had also done several homes. He was famous for designing the Jackie Gleason House on Alton Road, and he also expanded the Temple House in South Beach that was originally designed by L. Murray Dixon. Another home is, again, we have another architect, Robert Law Weed architect, who we'll see in a few photos. But this was a very simple home he designed on one of the islands. And there's a classicness about it also. What's nice about some of these well-known architects who may have been used to doing bigger homes is that they were also adept at designing smaller homes. Remember this style because it's interesting with this architect, because this is the year 1933. In just 2 years, this architect totally changed his style of architecture, but we're not going to see that for a number of pictures. This house at 4810 North Bay Road, I do not have an architect, but there was a romantic charm about it, from the arched doors at the lower floor to the balcony that wraps around a semi-recessed courtyard, and that beautifully romantic staircase. This is a house with the round entrance hall that you see protruding from the top. I'm guessing it's a stair hall, but so many of these homes that we've only had a glimpse of from the outside would certainly be wonderful to look on from the inside. This was another famous home that is no longer there. This is, I believe this has been demolished. Daniel would have to confirm that. But in 1935, this was the home built for Mayor John Levi of Miami Beach. And he was the long-term mayor. He was a mayor of Miami Beach, and he was the guy who first brought Carl Fisher to Miami Beach. He was the first and only Miami Beach mayor to be honored by having his picture on the cover of Time magazine in the February 19th, 1940 issue. The other interesting thing about this house on the right is this is the elevation facing Biscayne Bay. And although there's no railings and it seems to have been stripped a lot of its detail, this was designed in 1935 in what was called the Monterey style, which came out of Monterey, California. It was not that prolific, but there were a number of homes in Miami Beach that were designed this way. And it was designed by an architect named John Nixon Bullen, who was actually a very prominent architect in Miami Beach in the 20s, because he was responsible for many of the Spanish Mediterranean buildings along Lincoln Road. This is the house I was telling you to remember, the former, more traditional house that Robert Law Weed designed. This was originally the General Electric house of the future, built on the corner of 60th and Lagoor Drive in Miami Beach. It's interesting because this was one of the earliest attempts to formalize a new modern architecture, which was more in tune with its tropical surroundings. This home was actually a direct spin-off of the Florida model house for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, which was also designed by Weed. So it seems like when Robert Law Weed designed his home, the Florida model house for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, seems to have given him an epiphany in architecture, because the style was never the same afterwards. I've also included a historic photo of the house on the left. And what's fascinating about this is you can see that in addition to the long planter box, which really fills in that empty space between the windows and the carved frieze. It also, now that I see it with the planter box, it seems like that's what the architect intended. But more egregious in a way is the way all the windows on the second floor have been totally changed. First of all, they're square windows now where they used to be rectangular. And there were at one time 4 windows above the main door. Now there's 2. So you can see the spacing has been different. So I don't know when this happened, but again, not many of these homes, in fact, all of these homes are not in any historic district. One last thing. This home was interesting because it featured many technical innovations at the time, including an automatic garage door opener and a curtain wall that could be converted to a movie theater. Originally, this linear planter was there. And I also wanted to point out that the idea of having plants in a planter as part of the architecture also occurred on the original Sterling building on Lincoln Road, where beneath all of the second floor windows running the full length of the building was a planter at some point. I am guessing that as an architect, these planters were not too easy to maintain, and watering live plants there may have meant that water trickled down the facade. So I'm not surprised to see it gone, but in the total realm of architecture, I think it adds a lot to the facade. 1936, this is a home by Martin Hampton architect. He was also a well-known architect in Miami Beach, who also designed the Miami Beach, the old City Hall building on Washington Avenue, as well as the conversion of the original Wolfsonian building into a museum. He was more known for his Mediterranean architecture, so this is a little bit of an anomaly, but it reminds me of so many homes up in Connecticut. It looks like it was a northern home transplanted, but nonetheless very elegant and has some great detailing with that railing along the water. And then we come to this home. Again, we're back up on Lagoor Circle, which is at the very north end of Mid-Beach, I would say. This was designed by the architect Maurice Fatio. And although he may not be that well known in Miami Beach, he was one of the 2 major architects in Palm Beach, the other one being Addison Meisner. He first started in New York and then moved to Palm Beach, but it's interesting, in his biography, it said in May 1923, the 26-year-old Fatio was voted the most popular architect in New York City. He basically started out doing Mediterranean homes, but then branched out into every kind of style. This is the kind of home we'd also love to walk through because it looks like a gigantic ballroom on the right, if that, and it's a big home. Obviously, I could say more. Here we have another architect who's not as well known, Arthur Laidler-Jones. And this again is a modified Monterey style, similar to the one we had seen for James Allison. It looked like in this photo that it was ready for demolition, but Daniel has assured me that it is still standing. Daniel is my expert on everything to do with the islands here, since he grew up there and knows so much about it. Another home that struck my eye on my camera was up on Sheffield Lane, again up in Lagoor Circle neighborhood. And it's just, I think it was the totality of the tree and the architecture. This again is a pretty Regency style home, but yet it's held together very well, and it looks like its detailing has held. This is a very interesting home, 5030 North Bay Road, designed by Carlos Schopel and his associate, Jorge I will not pronounce it because I will mangle the word, his name. It's notable because it's the former residence of Mayor Mitchell Wolfson and his family, and where his son Mickey Wolfson Jr. grew up. What I find interesting is that the photograph on the right is courtesy of the book Miami Beach by Michelle O'Connor and Mitchell Wolfson Jr. And it shows a portion of the rear facade of the house, which we can compare with the facade as it stood. Actually, this photograph on the left was taken in 2014. You can see the infill on the second floor balcony arches is different. That has been changed. And it looks like in the old photograph, a small window like a bathroom was protruding. This has been changed so that it's hard to tell from these photos, but it looks like it may be an outdoor walkway just to preserve the arches on top. You can also see on the first floor that the window below, that's a three-sided window, has been totally renovated and differs from what was in the original photograph. And the one-story addition on the right that shows on the left-hand photo, the 5 very handsome windows that go down to the ground, you can see that was an entirely different window arrangement on the right. And of course, this raises lots of issues in terms of the fact that these are rear facades facing the water. So even if these were in historically protected districts, it's doubtful whether owners would not be allowed to change the rear of the home. A wonderful detail that I came across, and we don't know the architect, is this home at 2700 North Bay Road. You're actually looking over a wall to the front entrance door, and there's this beautifully arched, beautiful arch of tiled arch that goes around the door. And when you walk through the door, you can tell you're not in the house, but you're in a courtyard that then leads to the house. This is another home by Carlos Schopel. This is a home at 1753 Northview Drive, and this was the original home of R.J. Reynolds. I do not think the gates were original, but certainly what we can see of the house here looks as if it was built, as it were, back in 1937. And this house actually broke my heart when it was demolished, not because it was designed by a special architect, although it may have been if we would know, but there was a certain romanticism about it. And what was so illustrative about this house and so many of the houses, one thing I found in Miami Beach in studying these homes is that they all had 2 main entrances. They had the main entrance facing the street, where you'd enter arriving by automobile. But then a house like this would also have the main entrance facing the water for when you would arrive by boat. And on many of these homes, there was no diminution in the grandeur of the front versus the back. So you felt as if you were really arriving. Anyway, this home was I find that although so many of these homes are demolished, at least through these photographs, we have a record of what used to be. Now, this is a home designed by the architect Henry Hohauser, one of the very few. In fact, I don't know of any others, although there may be. And it's interesting because it seems so unlike so much of his other deco work. But then again, this was 1939 when deco had morphed into streamlined moderne and rounded corners were more de rigueur. This is a real mix of many styles, but it looks like, as any architect, he was trying to experiment with the forms and with what he was working with. This is an exquisite staircase by the architect Igor Polavitsky. It almost looks, I don't know what it looks like, but it looks like a structure in itself with the flat bars of stainless steel, and then interspersed with the spheres of plexiglass. It was a real beautifully classic staircase in a home on Flamingo Drive. Another home up on Lagoor Circle. Again, we don't know the architect. Again, a very Regency style. I was just trying to give a sense of the variety of homes in Miami Beach. And one of the things that struck me about homes built so many years ago was that they were so different. Each one was so individual. This was a home on Pine Tree Lane, again, up in Lagoor Circle neighborhood, that features a, for lack of a better word, a New Orleans style balcony. This was a design feature of many homes in Miami Beach in the 40s. And this is exemplary. This is an example of that. So we're up to 1940. And then, as you well know, 1941 to 1945 was World War II, when basically everything stopped. And I have a feeling that a slide like this may be put into our current years when we talk about the pandemic. But when we get to after the war, styles changed. And as with any prolonged period of time when people have a chance to reassess what's important in their lives and what's important in their society, aesthetic values changed. And they changed drastically from before the war till after the war. This is a home on North Bay Road by Giller and Giller. And it's fascinating because it's a classic example of the MiMo period. It's very gracious inside, very spacious, and Norman Giller and his firm designed the house. But when you look at the photo on the left with the gate, when the present owner of the house decided to expand, he went back to the original architects, and he had Ira Giller design some additions to the home as well as the front gate, which is a nice generational way of tying the building together. So I like that story. Another modern home that's not well known by Morris Lappet is up at the corner of 46th and North Michigan Avenue. I've had to include on the lower left a Google Earth view because it helps to understand that the house is almost a complete circle and all the facades are circular. It seems very crowded on its site, but yet it provides a very welcome respite from every other home. It doesn't look like a home. It's very, very different looking. I encourage you to drive by and take a peek. And unfortunately, both of these homes are gone, but Igor Polavitsky was very well known, for his birdcage houses. One moment. His birdcage houses, where these emphasized, as Alan Schulman has described, the fluidity and ambiguity between indoors and out. For Polavitsky, the magic of Florida was in the gentle atmosphere that invited individuals to live outdoors. The black and white photo shows the famous second Heller house, which was located on the Venetian Islands. The home became famous after being published in many national magazines. And these articles emphasize the home's flexibility, allowing for different experiences within the floor plate. And there was also the progression from inside to outside that Polavitsky studied and incorporated in his homes. We're almost to the end here. This is totally out of order. I don't have a year, I don't have an architect, I only had an address. And I will say that Daniel liked this home. And as we were driving by, it was interesting because we noted that it was interesting to see the relationship of an older home with a newer home in Miami Beach. And as one drives by, you get a sense of just what the relationship could be. It's interesting to see also that this home was likely built a number of years ago because the ground floor of this section of the home is right on grade, as opposed to being built up to to account for flood level. But obviously, there's a number of concerns for all older homes in these neighborhoods. And I think it's good that we've come to the point where we see that a blank wall such as this doesn't work and is not neighborly. And if we go to a wall where there are indentations and the building mass is broken up, I think it helps a lot more. I think we've come a long way in terms of our understanding of how to build new homes that are much bigger and hopefully how to have them relate to the existing architecture. So this is a section of the Venetian Islands that I took, and it's interesting because I do see a lot of Miami Beach becoming modern homes and a lot of the older homes being demolished. So I wanted to show a few pictures of our life on the water since we've been concentrating on the land. And this was just a kind of I do these esoteric photos of familiar landmarks from an unfamiliar place. So we have something like this, and then we have the blue and green diamonds, which were floating in the midst of the islands here in the middle of Biscayne Bay. And as a closing, I'm using two of my sunset shots to end out the period. These were taken, you can tell by the skyline, these were probably taken around 2005. So the downtown Miami skyline has changed a bit. And my last one is one I entitled Moon Over Miami. I had to. The moon was there, the skyline was there, and it made the perfect shot. So I thank you very much for your time today and for attending. And I hope we've all learned a little bit of appreciation for the wonderful architectural homes that we have in our community. Thank you, Daniel.
Great. Thank you so much, Arthur. And I'm sure if everyone were here in person, you'd be hearing a big round of applause. So for those who would like to ask a question, we would ask that you either type the question into the chat or that you there's a Q&A section. So I see some already, so we'll get started, Arthur. Oh, Pamela asked a question while you were showing the image of the aerial along the beach with the Rooney Plaza under construction. And she asked, it seems that the water is much closer in the current photos than the original photos. Is that because of erosion?
Yes. I mean, the beach has been filled in a number of times, so I'm sure it is. I'm trying to find the picture you're talking about.
I think it was the one right before the aerial black and white.
I know. Hold on.
Sorry, it wasn't right before. Thank you, Susan. We love Miami Beach.
We will get to it here.
Okay, great. So,
Now,
okay, Susan asked a question. Why wouldn't the GE home have been protected as a landmark?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, in my mind, it should be, but of course now with the renovations that have occurred, that may be an issue. But this is a classic home in Miami Beach, and you can see it was designed in 1935. And as we saw some of the other homes being designed around the same time, this was a real outlier. Nothing else was being designed that even remotely looked like this. So from our eyes today, this is a classic home, and it would be great if it were protected.
And actually, I will say that even though there has been a change in the configuration of the windows, because there is historical documentation, it wouldn't be something I think that would, remove its possibility of landmark status. And I do know the owners, and they are interested in that. And by the way, if anybody is watching this who lives in a pre-1942 or an architecturally significant home that is not currently landmark, and if they're interested in landmarking, you can get in touch with us, because we love to help people to designate their homes historic so that they are, in the future, these great examples of architecture of the period. I also have a question from Susan saying, the house at 5863 Lagoor is a block away from the GE home. And she asked, are all the Art Deco homes in that small area?
I don't think any one style is confined to any one area, because these architects worked all over the place. So I think it could be anywhere in Miami Beach.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Jack Johnson, our board chair, asked, how did the GE House of the Future get that designation? What features did it have that resulted in that name? And was it originally built as a display house?
That's a good question, Jack, and I honestly do not know that answer. I know that it was the GE house and that there were a lot of technological innovations in the house. I don't have more information than that, short of when we do the historic designation report, we will find all that out.
Sounds good. And I know that I had read about when I researched the house that it was part of a show, some sort of, and maybe someone in the comments could add. I see Dave Arlen wrote that Weed's 1933 Century of Progress home
Right.
was relocated to the Indiana shoreline of Lake Michigan. And
Yes, that was the all pink house.
right. That's a great one for maybe a future virtual or in person.
Well, and this house was inspired, obviously, by that one.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Okay. Christina asks, when did they change the Roni Palace?
Oh, I don't have a date at hand.
I can answer that. It was 1958 was when it was demolished. Unfortunately, that was before the time of historic preservation in Miami Beach. And
In my mind, this is a loss for Miami Beach equal to the loss of Penn Station in New York City.
Absolutely. Okay, and then we had a question about, in terms of floods and hurricanes, how are the waterfront landmarks protected? Maybe I could take that question. We have a Center for Resiliency and Sustainability that was started about 5 years ago by Laura Weinstein Berman, who has a master's in preservation from Columbia. And she, for her thesis, studied historic preservation in light of climate change, including flooding and hurricanes. And so there have been recently some new guidelines by Alan Schulman that have grown out of this interest in protecting the buildings. There's a new document that was recently adopted by the city of Miami Beach called Buoyant Cities, Buoyant City, singular. And it talks about making these buildings, keeping them resilient. So that could be a whole other conversation. And if you go on our MDPL YouTube, you'll see we have a series of videos all about climate change and flooding and historic designation, because obviously it's something that is very important for the long-term preservation.
Daniel, was the title of Alan's study Buoyant Cities?
Buoyant, yes. Buoyant. I always say buoyant. It's like tomato.
Sounds very French.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, it's, who knows? Maybe I'm in that Art Deco state of mind. Okay. So let's see. Any other questions? Somebody asked where we could see the photos. Arthur, do you still have those available for purchase, or?
I don't have them on my website. I have to put them up, but I think the best way to see them right now, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about that, is when Daniel posts this online.
Oh yes, that's true. These will be on our Facebook live. It's being streamed right now to Facebook. And by the way, we had over 170 users connected, which is I think a record for us. So thank you, Arthur, for it. It sounds like, I mean, this is a very important topic, I know, in our community, the single family homes, and we see a lot of them unfortunately being purchased by speculators and knocking them down to build big, large houses. And there isn't a lot of preservation right now. And we even have a whole neighborhood, by the way, a beautiful neighborhood of Palmview that is still very much intact because it is designated historic. But there are some residents there who are actually trying to undesignate it. And so there's definitely been a lot of pressure on these single family homes. And so I think just raising awareness about them and their beauty, hopefully we'll be able to find more people to invest in them, to love them, and to keep them as part of the pedigree of our city.
Daniel, in part answer to that previous question, this presentation today grew out of a photo exhibition we had at MDPL, must be 6 years ago. Seems like a while ago. As I said, perhaps in the future, that might be something worthwhile doing again.
Yes. So if anyone was at our exhibition, let us know in the chat. Maybe just say yes. We had a great exhibition, and I also forgot what year it was, but I'm guessing you mentioned we were on the
I think it
boat
was
in
2014.
2014, and we printed the photos really big. And so as beautiful as it is here, it was just as beautiful in person and very large. And that was during our efforts, the beginning of the efforts of preservation of the single family homes. So yeah, I would love to do that again sometime. And I see, oh, Jack Johnson mentioned, very good point. Laura Weinstein Berman, who runs our Resiliency Center, was also nominated by MDPL to be in the MDPL seat on the Historic Preservation Board.
Right?
So the commission had to vote on placing her there, and we're very thankful that the commission, supports the idea of resiliency and historic preservation, because it's a critical issue that we have to work on. So let's see, any final questions? Marcia asks, where is Palmview located? So Palmview District is located just north of 17th Street. So it's right above Lincoln Road, and it's essentially between Lenox Lenox on the west, and then on the east, Alton Road. And there's a great collection of single family homes from the three major periods, the 20s Mediterranean, 30s and 40s Deco, and then 50s, 60s MiMo. So it's a beautiful, quiet neighborhood, but right in the middle of all the buzz of Lincoln Road and South Beach.
The other neighborhood I would suggest, if people are not familiar with, is to drive through Lagoor Circle neighborhood, because before I had done so 6 years ago, I was unaware of how many beautiful homes are up there. And the neighborhood really is pretty intact up there also.
Absolutely. Oh, and Annika writes that the Roni was demolished in 1968. Okay.
Okay.
I had thought it was 58, but thank you.
I know it was the 60s sometime. We can check that.
Yeah, no, it was 68. That's another one of those things I always mix up. But yes, that was a sad moment, but in a way it's been a lesson, I think, or it started, I think, in the conscience of the people around the city to realize, like, wow, the Roni could just be removed, like, how is that possible? But it really wasn't until, later in the 70s that the preservation movement really took hold. And
it's interesting too that I believe it was the mid 60s, I don't have a date, that Penn Station was also demolished. And that was one of the beginnings of the preservation movement, especially in New York and eventually around the country. So hopefully it may have had some effect in Miami Beach at that time.
Right, absolutely. Another thing, while we're on the topic of single family homes, Arthur, I think it's interesting to mention that north of the Fontainebleau, or where the Firestone estate was on Upper Collins Avenue, was beautiful mansions like the type you see in Palm Beach, right along the beachfront. But as soon as the Firestone estate, they took the city to court, and that could be a whole other talk one day about how they got the zoning change from estate to hotel. And so as soon as the Firestone estate was approved to be demolished and changed to the Fontainebleau as a hotel, basically all of the grand mansions north along there were knocked down. And we don't have, unfortunately, much of any documentation of those old homes on Upper Collins, although I bet Carolyn Klepser
Sure.
has.
The other thing Carolyn has mentioned in her book and I've talked to her about this, is that in the 20s, I don't have these dates at hand. The northern boundary of Miami Beach was around 46th Street. And it was about, I think it was, I'm not sure when it was moved north, and that helped precipitate the demolition of a lot of those grand oceanfront homes in the area we now call Millionaires Row.
Right. Yeah, it's just, you know, I think our city has so many layers of history. And so it's interesting to travel back in time through your photos and your
And I
research.
find through these photos and learning a little bit more about the history of each of these properties, that it's fascinating to see the causes behind why they were demolished. And just like we were talking about, the political and economic forces were really responsible for this. And there was no will, unfortunately, back then to save homes like this.
Right, exactly. So, well, great. Well, thank you again, Arthur.
Thank you.
This was great. For those of you who are on our Art Deco Weekend circuit, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, if you don't mind to unshare yours, and then I will show, we're very high tech over here. Okay, so hopefully you all can see that now. These are our upcoming events. So today at 4 o'clock, we have with the Wolfsonian FIU, the tour of the Saarinen House in Michigan. But before that, at 3 p.m. Eastern time, we'll have a 20s Charleston dance class with Yuval from our speakeasy. And then this evening at 7:30 p.m. is our final Deco Speakeasy. And that's where we invite all of you to dress up in Deco and dance and listen to great music and variety acts. Then tomorrow, Sunday, we'll have at 11 a.m. the Movie Lover's Guide to South Beach by Joel Levine. And then at 4 p.m., we're going to have the Hollyhock House Tour, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's first great project in Los Angeles. That will be organized with the Wolfsonian FIU. And we also Sunday have a solo jazz dance class at 3 p.m. So we thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming events. Thank you.